All right, Junkie Nation, it's time to talk some PFL. We got Randy Couture, former UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion, Hall of Fame, of course, and he's now a current PFL color commentator. It's PFL 2021 Week 4 upon us on Thursday, ESPN Plus at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Then the main card starts at 10 p.m. Eastern over on ESPN2. Welcome back, Randy. How you doing?
Good. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. Boy, it is blowing my mind how crazy all the scenarios are on Thursday. If you look at the featherweight standings, only Brendan Loughnane is safe in terms of if he just wins the most boring fight ever and collects his 3, he can't be touched. Then you got 4 guys with 3 points. And then over in the lightweight division, you got 5 guys with 3 points. So this is madness. Like, as night unfolds, it's going to be madness. It's going to be like the NFL draft. You're going to be listening to, every team's pick and see what they're doing. Same thing here. You're going to be, crossing out names or, maybe seeing new possibilities arise as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Absolutely unique to this format, and especially in these 2 weight classes. Everybody's still got a shot at making the Final Four and getting to the postseason playoffs. So it's going to be real. I mean, we've got 2 returning champs that were both looking like, they were going to be on their way to 3-peating, and both of them lost. Anthony Pettis, who arguably in the last decade, one of the most exciting and dynamic mixed martial artists in our sport, and he also lost. So it's a toss-up. There's a lot of things that can happen. It's going to be interesting. We had to develop some pretty intricate tiebreakers to keep this straight, because it's going to be I'm really excited. And then obviously the icing on the cake, we're getting to see Clarissa Shields make her MMA debut in an exhibition fight against Brittany Elkin. Classic matchup of a grappler versus a striker, and obviously one of the best strikers that we've ever seen in boxing. Olympic champion, two division world champion, trying to, in her prime at 26 years old, making her debut in mixed martial arts with the PFL. So pretty cool. Going to be a great night.
This fight card definitely has a lot to offer. What I want to ask you, because we've asked a few of the guys either at the gym or on interviews, what about that TV in the locker room? How much, we'll call it scoreboard watching or fight watching, is going to be happening? You've been in these, Goes, and I haven't.
Yeah. Well,
are fighters so messed up by what they see that it really can mess them up? Because it's harder for me to understand where, like, an Aaron Rodgers can sit on the bench and watch his defense give up a TD, and he'll put on his helmet and go, let's go to work. But MMA fighters, I noticed, are a little bit different. Like, they have a different type of programming.
It is. And I think in my own experience, being in a locker room, I never really watched. You just kind of watch out of your peripheral what's going on the TV with the fight, to see the pace, see how the referees and the judges are scoring things, and get a feel for what's going on in the show. And unless one of your teammates is fighting, you don't really tune in. And even then, you have to be careful not to spend too much energy getting engaged and involved in that fight, whether, even though it is your teammate. That's a challenge. These guys have no choice. They have to literally tune in, because what's going on out there in the cage while they're warming up and getting prepared can have an absolute effect on what they need to do when they walk out there and fight. Do they have to have a finish to even get into the running for the playoffs? Can they coast? What do they have to do? I don't think any of these guys are going to coast. If past PFLs are any indication, these guys are going to get after it either way. So it's going to be fun, though.
You brought up Schulte's name earlier, and along with Lance Palmer, those are 2 of the former champs. Oh, I shouldn't say champ. Champ would be simultaneous, but guys that have repeated. So 2-time champions. What do you think may have gone wrong? Is it tough to go from, on the 31st of the last 2 years, I got to fight for $1 million, and now I'm back to my regular pay? Like, do they compartmentalize fights like that? Or do they just look at the whole season's pay as this is my year's salary? What do you think? Or is it just, are we giving a lack of credit to their opponents? What do you think may have been the main factor here for both guys getting tripped up?
Well, I think it's interesting. Did they feel some pressure? We certainly didn't protect them. I mean, those matchups were solid matchups. nobody's resume matters, and each and every season stands alone. Every single guy on the roster has a shot at winning that $1 million and being the champ for that season. And these guys were certainly favorites coming in, having been 2-time champs, both of them undefeated in 2 seasons in the PFL. So both their opponents did amazing things to knock them off and put them under the gun now going into the second regular season fight to score some bonus points, to finish early and get enough points, hopefully, to make it into that top 4 and a playoff spot. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that adversity, how they've compartmentalized, like you said, and have they put that in the right place. I just got done with fighter interviews with all of the fighters on this card, and both those guys seem motivated. Tough one for Nathan because he's literally fighting one of his best friends, somebody that he's trained with for a long time in the last 10 years. So that's an added challenge for him, fighting somebody that he genuinely cares about and that has been part of his process, getting him where he's been. A little easier for Lance, I think, with that regard, but Lance is, motivated now. Feels like he just was not into that fight. He couldn't explain whether it was a 17-day bubble, but I mean, he said before the fight even happened, I just couldn't wait to go home, which is an interesting mindset for him because he's a tenacious competitor and a well-rounded fighter. So both these guys have a lot to overcome, 6 weeks ago, coming off a pretty significant loss for both of them, to get back on track, get back into the playoffs and have a shot at the three-peat. So it's a pretty fun storyline to be involved in.
I was thinking about you this weekend, Randy, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tie this into Clarissa Shields, okay? I promise I will. I was thinking about Clarissa Shields and, everything that's going on right now where we're seeing these MMA athletes taking on some boxing fights. They want to get in there and try and get some of these paydays. And throughout that time, you'll get Joe Schmo, and they'll always say, well, how come the boxer never goes over to MMA? And Clarissa Shields is a perfect example of a high-level boxer going into mixed martial arts. But I got to thinking, could it be that you ruined this for everyone? Because of what you did to James Toney, was that the fight that maybe boxers said, I'm never going to try this? Is it because of you, Randy?
Well, I mean, I may have sent a message for sure, but let's be honest. James Toney wasn't exactly in his prime when he decided to transition over to MMA. And that is not the case with Clarissa Shields. At 26 years old and literally a standing 2-division champion, she is in her prime in boxing, and she wants to be the greatest women's athlete of all time, and she wants to transition to mixed martial arts and show why she deserves that title. And I gotta say, I think a lot of us have our hats off to her for, in her prime, wanting to make that transition and make a risk like that, take a risk like that. So hats off to her for that. I'm excited to see how she does. Both those gals, Brittany Elkin and Clarissa, have a very clear understanding of what's standing in front of them. They both outlined exactly what they need to do to win, and it's going to be really interesting to see who has their way on Thursday night.
Randy, let's talk a little bit about the risk involved, because as I start to think about it a little bit, even if Clarissa Shields goes in there and loses, I have so much respect for her attempting to do this in mixed martial arts and going that. Trust me, I don't want to say I would forget about it, but you got to give your hats off to somebody attempting to do something like this, of this magnitude. What do you think Clarissa thinks in her mind? I know she's the ultimate competitor and absolutely wants that win, but is there a lot of risk for her career?
Well, I think there's some risk for her legacy as one of the best combative sports female athletes that we've seen in this country. But I think she's got a great perspective about it. She realizes there's a whole bunch of more things to learn. She spent the last 9 months at Winklejohn and in Albuquerque trying to shore up some of those other technical things that she's going to face in a cage in a mixed martial arts fight. So yeah, absolutely hats off to her for doing that, for stepping up, for wanting to make a transition and put it on the line like that. Not that we haven't seen that before. I mean, obviously Kayla Harrison did the same thing as a 2-time gold medalist in judo. She took her time. She learned all the other things. She put herself in a great camp with a lot of great training partners to kind of shore up what she saw as potential weaknesses. Judo alone wasn't going to be enough. And she's been very diligent. It's been fun to watch her unfold too. And I mean, ultimately, where are we going to end up? I think we could potentially end up with Clarissa Shields and Kayla Harrison somewhere down the road in the final, trying to battle it out and see who's the best. So I think that's where we're all excited about how this unfolds. Honestly, I think even if Clarissa Shields loses on Thursday night, she's going to use that as fuel to continue to shore up, figure out where she's an amazingly diligent athlete. She's very smart. She's going to figure it out sooner or later. And the real question is, how much has she learned now to add to that world-class striking ability that she has? So, I mean, none of us can answer that question. We'll be able to answer that on Thursday.
Randy, in your career personally, were you ever offered any of these type of fights to go in and try boxing, even if it was at an exhibition or anything like that? That they were trying to pull you in?
Well, after the James Toney fight, certainly that came up in the post-fight press conference. Oh, hey, you're going to give him a shot now? You're going to step into the boxing ring and box him? And I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that. I have no illusions about being a world-class boxer. My boxing was proficient enough for me to get people where I needed them to be, which was in wrestling situations and clinching situations. So, and that's what I like about what Clarissa's doing. She's got a very clear view. She's not being a typical boxer, which we've heard for years. Oh, I'll just go in there and knock all those guys out. They're terrible at striking. They don't understand all the facets to our sport. And if you break down our striking in MMA in a pure boxing sense, from a boxer's perspective, it probably does look hokey and ridiculous. But until you have somebody standing in front of you that can take you down, hold you, punch you in the face, put you against a solid barrier, you just don't understand it. You don't get it. And I think that's the difference between the mindset Clarissa Shields is bringing into this and every other boxer that I've seen chirp about MMA. So yeah, these guys that like these Logan and Jake Paul characters, and they're not picking pure strikers and authentic boxers to go in there and play these games with. They're picking guys that have pretty solid wrestling backgrounds that have also made the transition to MMA, and like me, had a proficient striking style to get fights where they needed to in mixed martial arts. So, I mean, I'm certainly a fan of Tyron Woodley. I hope Tyron goes out there and frankly knocks the hell out of this kid. But again, Jake Paul has been diligent, chose a guy with a great name, somebody he knows is going to give him some heat back with all the rhetoric and talk, but he's not a pure boxer. He's an amazing wrestler, but he's not a pure boxer. So that's smart on them. And in some ways, it is shining the light on the disparaging difference between pay in boxing versus pay in MMA. And there's a reason for that. And then as much as I hate to listen to Jake Paul talk, when he started ranting and poking Dana about those disparaging differences in pay, I was rooting him on.
Very interesting. Gus brought up the James Toney angle. I did have a follow-up. Did he ever say anything to you after the fight or in the years since? Have you ran into each other? Anything along the lines of, boy, you kicked my ass that night, or any respect towards our sport, I guess, any those types of words?
I haven't seen him since the post-fight press conference. I haven't run into him anywhere else. I have seen a couple of exchanges on social media platforms with him, not talking about me specifically, but people bringing the fight up with me to counter some of the things he was talking about on social media. But I don't really engage in a lot of that, certainly not that negative stuff. So I haven't run into him. James and I had met each other several times before we were signed to fight through Affliction and other appearances and stuff. And he was always friendly, always respectful. Obviously, I knew what was going to happen, and the rhetoric and the chatter was more of a tactic, trying to see if he could get under my skin, see if he could get me to focus on that instead of what I needed to do to win the fight.
Last one from me. There's this show on A&E that's based on pro wrestlers who are retired, looking back on fights that meant a lot to them and seeing if there's any memorabilia they'd like to have from one of those fights. So like Sergeant Slaughter, I don't know if you follow pro wrestling at all, but Sergeant Slaughter said I got kicked in the head by the Iron Sheik's boot. I'd love to see that boot or whatever. And so the WWE is trying to make that happen and then collect it for their museum. On your end, is there any memorabilia out there that you're like, man, I wish I had these fight shorts or this or that from any of the great fights that you had in all the organizations you fought? Any in particular?
I have a lot of that. We have auctioned off some of that stuff for my charity endeavors. I do have a lot of those sweatsuits and I guess the one thing I didn't really get to save were those gloves. A lot of times they make you turn the gloves back in, but I did have some of those gloves. I had all of the shorts, and I gave some of the shorts to some of my sponsors, auctioned some of that stuff off in support of the GI Foundation or MVP, Emerging Vets and Players. So, but yeah, I can't think of anything. I even have, I think, one or two of the canvases that I fought on that the UFC gave me as well. I know one of those is hanging up in the gym here, and the other one was hanging up in the gym at Team Quest. But yeah, I kept a lot of that stuff. You don't think a lot about the wraps when you cut those wraps off. I kind of wish I'd have kept a bunch of those wraps. I think those were pretty cool items too, but they just get thrown away.
Is there one in particular of the wraps that would be special to you?
Probably that retirement fight up in Toronto against Lyoto Machida. And obviously I didn't win that fight, but it was still a huge fight, biggest crowd we've ever had. And it was my last fight, my last round. So I probably should have been forward thinking a little more and saved those wraps. But the rest of that stuff I have.
One thing they do on this show that George is talking about is once they finally do find the memorabilia, they ask whoever it is, the collector, how much for it. If I was that guy and I said I just so happen to have that wrap right here, what would you offer for that, Randy?
Oh man, I don't know. I'd have to really think about that, and I have no idea what something like that would be worth. I don't know. It'd be an interesting conversation. I don't think it's something I'd get ridiculous about as far as price. Honestly, I still have those memories. I was there. I mean, the book and all the stuff that came out of that is still here and doing well. And so I wouldn't get too crazy with it, but it'd still be a cool thing to have to put in a shadow box or something.
What goes conveniently left out is that some of the collectors told the star athlete there's no charge and just let them have the memorabilia. Wow. Check out Goes trying to pocket a couple K on your end.
I don't have it.
Well, of course, I'm talking about the made up scenario here, but you sure didn't say that you have it for free, RC.
I told him I'd take a beer or something like that. I wouldn't hold that thing for ransom. Can you imagine walking into Extreme Couture, the balls on me, trying to sell him back his own gear? There's no way I'd get away with that.
I was thinking those wraps that James Toney wore on his ankles, because that's what Randy was shooting for when he went for that low single. Was those wraps, right, Randy? That you said that they stood out to you like bullseyes. Man, if he still had those and signed them, that'd be cool.
That is absolutely true, and it made me smile as soon as I saw him come into the cage with those. The one that was funny to me was Howard's Combat Kimonos. HCK was a sponsor for a long, long time, and I always wore red shorts. And Howard called me up before the third Belfort fight. He said, "Hey man, I'm coming out with a new color. I'm coming out with white shorts. Would you wear those white shorts in this fight?" And I'm like, "Sure, Howard, I'll wear those shorts, no problem." Of course, that fight was a bloody mess. My shorts were pink by the end of the first round. I got a call on Monday after that fight from Howard. He said, "Please tell me you did not wash those shorts." I said, "No, Howard, I didn't wash the shorts. You can have them." And I mailed those pink shorts to Howard for all of his years of support. But that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's a great story. Did you know yesterday was the anniversary, I think the 18-year anniversary of your win over Liddell? You follow that stuff?
Fight. I saw that come up on my news feed and I reposted that fight. Obviously that was before the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and right before, just a year and a half or so before that fight. And a lot of people remember the second and third fight because obviously the sport had exploded and the Ultimate Fighter changed the landscape of mixed martial arts for all of us. So obviously I'm quite fond of the first fight, but a lot of people didn't see that fight. The sport hadn't quite exploded the same way yet. So it was kind of fun to be able to post that yesterday.
I know you've had a long day of interviews. I got to sneak one more in because I can't let this chance pass by. Any thoughts on Eric Nixick winning his first UFC title as a head coach? I know he was in Aljamain Sterling's corner. I know other titles have been won, but with the UFC, as him as the lead guy in Francis Ngannou's corner, and I know that you even assisted with a little bit of strategy there. What were your thoughts that night when he was able to bring that title back to Extreme Couture?
I was really proud of both Eric and Francis because I saw all the work that they put in, the time that they spent shoring up some of those potential weaknesses that Francis saw that he had, and Stipe, being the champ that he was, pointed some of those out to him. And he went to work trying to make those strengths and was diligent about it, didn't mind putting himself in some of those situations that are uncomfortable, that don't feel very good. And Eric directed that whole show. And Eric just has that amazing, gregarious, giving personality that you want to win for him. You want to do your best and perform your best and for a guy like Eric Nixick. And so I'm proud of him, proud of all that he's come and how far he's come as a coach and a leader in that team, in that practice room.
Most definitely. Thank you, sir, for the time today. We definitely look forward to your call on Thursday night on ESPN Plus at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, then at 10 p.m. Eastern for the main card. It's going to be great. I looked at all the scenarios. It's crazy how every fight is going to matter in terms of the point system. And, dreams are going to be crushed and, new possibilities are going to open up with every fight as they go. So I can't wait to just crack open a beer and eat some pizza and watch every single fight on Thursday night.
Thanks, guys. I always appreciate you having me on.